Welcome back to episode 78 of the Grappling Growth podcast with me, Joe Testouri. On today's podcast, I had the pleasure of welcoming on Jon Caldwell. He is a former Army veteran. He has exited a business. He's done over $25 million in sales in software, hardware, and services, and now is the founder of Free Victor, who essentially operates as a fractional growth operator for tech and service founders. Jon and I connected from one of our previous guests, Eric Josovitz, and we've had a few conversations in and around the background, and I thought he would be an excellent guy to jump on the podcast with to talk about AI. But not only that, we speak about AI for a fraction of this show. We go into the lessons that he is trying to bestow onto his children and how to lead with integrity. You're going to enjoy this podcast. Take care. As entrepreneurs, we all experience challenges in our business journey. I'm Joe Testouri, and the Grappling Growth podcast is my attempt at documenting my entrepreneurial journey while building my brands. I sit down with fellow entrepreneurs, understanding how they grapple with growth. I hope you find value and enjoy. Jon, pleasure having you on today.
Joe, happy to be here. Thanks.
You're welcome. Jon, I'm curious, what does growth look like to you?
I think it's a good question. You warned me there'd be a good question at the start. Growth, I think, has a lot of different dimensions. It could, there's like financial, there's your health, there's your family. I try to think of it holistically as I'm going through life, right? Am I growing in the right ways? Am I developing as a person? The simplest way that I think about growth is I look at, where I was a year ago, and I ask myself, have I progressed in the ways that are meaningful to me, and am I on the right track?
And when you look at that viewpoint, how did that look differently, say, 10 years ago?
10 years ago.
To kind of get more context, what were you doing 10 years ago?
10 years ago, I was starting my first brand, my first company, and I was really focused on just making a lot of money as fast as possible. That was my goal. And I think that was, that's an error looking back, but it was where I was at 25, right? So I'm 35 now. I think that what changed was I realized like the other aspects of life that make a life rich. Professional fulfillment is a huge part of it. But I think the mistake that I made back then was just optimizing for making as much money as possible. And I wasn't focused on working on problems that I found interesting. And I definitely wasn't following my passion. It was just something that I analyzed the market and I decided I'm going to do this because I think I can make money here. And that was it. So I think that's what's changed for me in the last 10 years is I started a family, got married. And so just my priorities kind of changed,
And I kind of anchored that because I gathered that's roughly the age you would have been at then. And I know your background and your experience, and I know you're married, family man. The transition away from being, say, a single bachelor guy in his mid-20s who's mainly focused on the immediate results, when you compare the lens and the scope to now, how profound do you think the impact of marriage was and is? And at what stage do you feel you felt this shift away from being focused on, I want to make as much money as possible, to actually I want to do stuff that's gratifying and I want to work on real problems and stuff that actually makes an impact to me and my clients?
I love it. That's a great question. I think the shift for me came when we started our family relatively young. I was in my mid-20s, and it was a realization that I wanted to be a good role model for my kids. And so I had to find, a way to work on things that, that were inspiring to me to show my kids that, this is how you should live your life. I felt like if I was going to give advice to my kids, I had to take it myself, right? Otherwise I'd be a hypocrite. And what kind of father are you if you're a hypocrite? So that was kind of like the thinking that got me there. I realized that I had to become a different person, and I had to have different priorities to be the right person, to be the right father for my kids. So that was the impetus, I think, for that.
And when you say, we're getting quite deep quite quickly,
I love it.
What would you say the right person for your children looks like? What's the role model you want to forge for your children?
So I want my kids to, and I guess this is a reflection of what I want to model for them, right? I want my kids to have high integrity, to have courage. So it's okay to be scared of something you're doing, but to do it anyway, in spite of your fear. That's what courage is. That's what I tell them all the time, right? I think Winston Churchill or something said that. So I'm just shamelessly ripping him off. Um, I want them to have, to be bold and think big, because a small vision doesn't inspire you and it doesn't inspire anyone around you. The irony is that, sometimes by working on bigger things and thinking bigger, you can, get more help from people and inspire them to support you, right? Um, I want them to be kind, but also not pushovers. So those are the things I try to model for them. It's like you can be compassionate, but you can also stand up for yourself, right? A lot of people treat them as dichotomies, and there's a lot of different dichotomies in life. But I think a lot of the trade-offs that people think are trade-offs are actually false. And there's different ways that you can handle things, right? With love and respect and compassion, but also with ambition and, you know, uh, being like tough in a way, right? Because like the world is tough and it's going to throw challenges at you, and you have to have that armor to face it. But like it's okay to also be a nice person at the same time. You don't have to become a jerk and let the world jade you and make you into a tough person or like into a mean person.
That's beautiful. My number one mantra in life is integrity above all else. That no matter what else happens, if you're in the wrong about something, lead with integrity. If just anything bad happens, someone does you wrong, as best as possible, lead with integrity. Because, and I had a friend who quoted it to me recently. So he's a really intelligent guy. He's got all of his CFA qualifications, level 1 to 3, moved to Australia, came back, and now he's looking for a job again. And he's been in this spot twice over now. And he was saying to me, he's like, "Oh, I remember the one piece of advice you gave me before, which was, will the position I'm in right now matter in 5 years' time?" And that's, I think, if we can look at that from the lens of, I don't know, if someone trips you up, a lot of people's natural reaction is, I want to go hit them. But you're not going to remember in 5 years' time that I just walked away. But if there was an adverse reaction, you hit them, something happens, they hit their head on the ground, you're always going to remember that in 5 years' time. That might be the consequence for the rest of your life. But just leading with integrity, keeping quite calm and just saying, no, it's not worth it, I'm going to move on. I think that has such a
Right.
more profound impact on the way how we lead. And I think the inverse as well, it helps with our decision making within business.
Yeah, I think so. Thinking on a longer time scale, and then for the interpersonal side of things, I teach my kids, forgive, but don't necessarily forget,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if someone wrongs you, I think it behooves you to forgive them. It's a weight to carry on your heart, right? To keep that anger. But I think that if you forgive people, that doesn't mean that you should forget their behavioral patterns. Like if they mistreat you, that doesn't, you should forgive them and then try to move on and decide, do I still want this person in my life? And if so, to what extent? Um, yeah, and I agree. I think like integrity too, like reputation. I've heard this expression years ago, and it really stuck with me. Is it takes years to build a reputation, but an hour, a minute to destroy it.
I think Alex Hormozy also said, uh, echoing that within business, for every one bad thing that happens, you need to do 37 good things in order to balance everything up. So, uh, thinking about everything in the way how I try to see the way how I carry myself online, in person, wherever, it's just we are our own brands, and we're consistently having to show up the best way possible. That's why when you see athletes and you see your Conor McGregor's just going off hinge and spiraling out, you just think, wow, this guy, he had it all. And what's happened? Definitely voice what you're saying there.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. No, I can imagine it's tough to reach those levels of success, and they have a lot of uh, it takes an extreme personality, I think, to get to that kind of level, and so it comes with a lot of baggage too, obviously, right?
Absolutely. So, looking at the last 10 years, you were in your startup phase. I know that you've exited business, and I'm sure there's a lot that's gone up and down there. And this is what we're trying to convey in this podcast: is not to just glorify the success. That's amazing, and we congratulate you for that. But getting a bit dirty, unwinding stuff for the people who, as we all have been within business, we have tough days, weeks, months, years. Could you maybe share with us a moment in business where you felt like quitting, and what that felt like for you, and how you overcame that stage?
Of course, yeah. Which one to talk about? Because there were
Which
several
ones
with
to
that
talk
first
about?
company, right? I think,
Just for the sake of the listeners, Could you tell them about your first company?
Yeah. So my first company was a product business. It was a physical product brand for cats and dogs. We made like supplements for their health, so like nutritional supplements, and it was completely outside of like my experience in technology sales and marketing. It was just I had this idea and I thought it would be cool. And again, it was like that market analysis. I looked like there was good margins and all that. So I launched the brand. We went on Dragon's Den. Built it to 400. Dragon's Den is like Shark Tank for the
Yeah,
American
yeah,
listeners.
we have dragons then.
Yeah, well, in the UK, right? But I know
Yeah,
sometimes I mention Dragon's Den to Americans and like, wait, what the heck is that, right? Um, so yeah, it's like Shark Tank, and we went on that in like 2016, and then the episode aired in early 2017,
that's
and
cool.
then like distribution just grew like crazy. So I cold called distributors to get our first listings, and then when I would tell them, hey, we're appearing on Dragon's Den next season, so check it out. That obviously helped a lot, right? So then we got into 450 stores by the time I sold the company in 2019. So that was my kind of arc. We also sold online, obviously, right in the U.S. and direct to consumer, but we had store distribution in Canada across the country.
Just a
Um,
question on that. How impactful do you think Dragons Den played a part? How much impact do you think Dragons Den played a part in the elevated success of the business?
There were two main ways that it drove success for us, actually three. So I had been talking to other investors before I
Hmm.
went on the show, and after the show, so we got offers from all the dragons, and the ones that I agreed to partner with was Jim Treleving, the founder of Boston Pizza. He's the one that I accepted the deal with on the show. And then afterwards, I had to like basically commit to exclusivity to explore the deal for 3 months. And I was already talking to other investors. So I said, well, I got to call my other investors first before I sign anything with you guys. Gave him a ring and I said, hey, Jim Trelving wants to invest. And then my other investors all of a sudden were like, okay, let's go ahead and we'll invest. We'll sign a term sheet right now and get this done. So that was the first way it helped. The second way it helped was by just telling stores and store chain owners that, hey, we're going to be on Dragon's Den. So we're going to have a natural publicity, bump coming up soon. So that
Credibility.
helped us get listings. So it helped them to say, oh, we want to stock this before the show airs so that we have enough inventory to really capitalize on the sales from that. And the third way it helped was the actual episode air date. So when it actually showed, and then all the retail sales went up. So I think I tracked it in that month, and retail sales tripled for like about 2 months afterwards, where I just had like triple the orders from our distributors to restock stores. Then obviously that helped long term because then our overall, with the retained customers from that bump, then obviously grew our overall like baseline revenue after that. So it was a really cool experience. Um, I think darkest moment was when I had bought too much inventory. So actually also tied to Dragon's Den, I had bought too much inventory leading into it. And I tied up almost all of our working capital in inventory. And so I had almost no money left to pay other vendors and myself a salary. And I had a little bit of runway, but I was like, not enough to go indefinitely, right? Because I'd poured most of my money into the company. And so I had this really difficult decision where I was looking at our cash runway and I realized like, I should start getting a job right now to save this capital in the company. So I had this really weird position where I had like almost 6 figures of inventory just sitting there waiting to go into stores, right? And we had this, wait for the Dragons Den episode. And I kept calling the producer every week, and I was like, Don, is our episode airing this week, or is it next month, or when is it coming?
So I need to pay the rent.
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, because I had so much cash tied up in inventory. So, and he was like, oh, I think it's coming next month. It's coming next month. So I started looking for jobs in the meantime, and it had to be remote. So I had flexibility, right? Had to be in a sales role because that was where my experience was. So I basically like made a list. So that was my darkest moment was like having to call my investors and say, hey guys, like I have to take a job because otherwise, unless you guys want to put more cash in, I got to take a job to keep this going. So I basically just, started cold calling tech companies across Canada and the U.S. And that's how I got my sales job. So it took me about 45 days or so, and then I had my job, and then that basically saved the company because otherwise we were going to be insolvent. So, and then Dragons Den aired like 6 months after that because there was a huge delay with production and like actually getting the episode to air, which was super frustrating. But then finally it aired, and then at that point I was already working and I was a quota carrying sales role. So I was like halfway through my quota at that point. So I figured, well, I'll at least wait here and finish the next like year or so just to do my job and then let the company kind of rebuild its cash reserves. And then I ran leaner. So my takeaway from that was running leaner with inventory and not overcommitting based on a verbal like, oh yeah, it's going to air in this month, right? So that was a big lesson, but that was definitely a time when I felt like quitting. You know, it's like I should just shut everything down, and then I was like, we've come so far, and the episode's about to air, so like it was this really weird dark period for about 6 months where it's like stress financially, the episode's about to air, we're gonna have success after the episodes, we just gotta tough it out, just gotta grind it out. So I was happy ultimately that we stuck with it and kept going.
Yeah, I think that's such an amazing lesson for so many founders where they're running a business. They and sometimes you, as entrepreneurs, we work a lot with our guts because you had the gut instinct that the episode would air eventually. If you didn't, you would have thought, well, actually, I'm not putting all of my eggs in one basket. This might not actually air. Maybe they don't think I'm great enough for TV, or the episode didn't click, or there's not enough budget. It doesn't matter what the issue is. You had enough balls to say, actually, I'm going to continue with this. I've put the money in here. I'm going to find my little side contingent and then see where I can go. And I've been in this position before where you're maybe pivoting your business or you're starting a new, really, maybe you've got a blue ocean strategy and you've got enough money there to just keep costs going and you're saying next month, next month, next month. And I think there's so many instances where as entrepreneurs, you're just waiting for that one break, that one opportunity, the right person or thing to come along that is your catalyst. And I think, talking back to the friend that he went off to Australia, when I went full time, I quit my banking job to go into my business. And we played football, soccer for anyone in North America. You've got the World Cup coming up next year. And I said, oh, I'm going to give myself 6 months. And he said, no, mate, I think you should give yourself at least a year. And it stuck with me instantly because I think the time horizon that I used for myself was just way too short. And generally, I find I have a rule of thumb, and I'd be curious to understand if you have a similar echo of voice. It sounds as though with this story that you shared, you do. But however long I think something is going to take, typically it takes 2 to 3 times longer to achieve.
That's fair. It's Yeah, I've seen that play out in my company and others. And I think it goes back to a quote. I think this was from Jeff Bezos. I might be misattributing it, but he said people tend to underestimate, or they tend to overestimate what they can do in 1 year, but underestimate what they can do in five. And I love that thinking because it shows how much of a long-term thinker you should be if you're in business, and make sure that you're betting on the right trends, like where the world is going. Like you want to skate where the puck is going, right? And so if you think about what's hot right now, what are people making money with right now, and you're just chasing that, every 3 to 6 months you're going to be changing and chasing that. But if you
Tactics.
think about, right, what are the things that are going to be true in a year, in 5 years, that's where you can start building something sustainable and making the investments in time, money, energy, focus to make sure that you can get to where the puck's going in the future. So I'm using a very Canadian analogy here.
I know the one though. I know the one, and it is one that we use within our company. And when we're looking at strategies, we don't want to be building strategies that are here for the next 3 to 6 months because they're going to become obsolete. And I think what you learn in computer science today is probably, I read this quote and this statistic a few years ago, so it's probably advanced massively with artificial intelligence, machine learning. However, 50% of what you learn today is obsolete information within 24 months. And I think the rate of exponential growth and the accessibility of technology today, and I mean, students using AI to essentially get their way to graduation, that the benchmark is so much higher than it was before. So it's really about seeing the vision, seeing the landscape, and that's where having the right mentors, coaches, and ecosystem around you is important. When you look back at your entrepreneurial journey, how much impact, and if you can share any of them, have mentors had, and possibly in your investors worked as mentors to that extent, have they had on your growth and success?
An immensely major impact. Yeah, I definitely don't think I'd be where I am today without the mentors and the partners that I've had over the years. It's everyone from when I got out of the military. So I spent 4 years in the Canadian Forces, and when I got out, I went through a program that basically paired you with a mentor at the end of it. And and the mentor I met through there, Eve, he's awesome. I'm still in touch with him today, and we're always messaging each other as we're traveling all over the world. he had a huge impact on me about like, thinking about the growth of my business and some of the risk factors that maybe I wasn't paying attention to. He was also just a sounding board for when things were tough, and he was someone I could turn to, right? So I'm always immensely grateful to him as like my first major mentor. My dad also was an entrepreneur, so he was a huge impact for me and kind of just showing me what's possible. That like you can build the life of your dreams and you can do whatever you want. Like any idea you have, you can try it out. And that was really inspiring and just like opening that door for me. I think that knowing that I had options after the military was my dad was a huge impact in that. And then he was always kind of, coaching me and cheering me on, as we were building the company. Um, and then I've had, yeah, mentors from my investors, the guys that first bet on me, Mark and Frank and JP. They were great guys, and still in touch with them. And they took that first bet on me, so I'm always grateful for that. I think that the role that mentors play is a lot of people, and this is probably something that I made a mistake in my earlier days, is I wasn't deliberate about seeking mentors. It was very haphazard. So those first mentors that I mentioned, it was just by pure happenstance as I was trying to build the company that I ran into them. And like that program I went to, I didn't go through it for the mentorship. I went through it to get financing at the end of it, right? So it was just other incentives, and it was like an extra benefit. But now, in retrospect, that was probably one of the main benefits, was getting that mentorship and someone that believed in me early on. So I think the way I approach things now is if I'm looking at an industry or an idea that I want to explore, my one of my first reflexes is now I try to find people who have been in that industry for a number of years, and I try to interview them. Right, it's kind of like that consultant methodology of go and get smart about a space really fast by reaching out to people who've done it, who've been in there, and they understand all the nuances. Because there are a lot of things that you probably don't understand about a space if you're interested in going into it. That can help you level up, and then also even just in whatever industry you've decided to work in, working with people who are just a couple of years ahead of you. They don't have to be 20 years ahead of you, right? They can be just a few years ahead and kind of show you where you're going to run into different things. So I've definitely spent a lot of money on coaching, mentorship, training, all kinds of resources over the last few years, and it's paid off very well. So I'm a huge fan of it.
That's amazing insight. For, let's say we've got John 15 years ago, so he's 20 years old. Um, he's in a place where he doesn't really know what value he brings to the table. So he just thinks he's like, okay, I finished college. Uh, I just play Xbox in my room. What value do I bring? How do you, when you're a young person, go and seek these mentors when you don't actually know what value you bring? Now, today, you know what value you can bring to companies and those around you, but what are the characteristics you could recommend to younger people? Maybe what you'd recommend to your children who are thinking, well, I don't really have any, I'm not bringing enough to the table right now. What do you think they could bring to the table for these mentors to say, I see something in you?
That's a really good question. I hope my answer helps out some kids who have like low self-esteem and don't think they have anything to bring to the table. I think so. So flipping back to 20-year-old me, in terms of skills, you're right. I think most 20-year-olds don't have a ton of skills that bring value to companies unless they really invest the time and energy to get there, right? I mean, there's a difference between if you're 20 and you spent the last few years, I don't know, building your content marketing skills or your cold email skills or other like, your video editing skills, whatever, right? You can definitely add value at that point, right? But if you're starting from like zero and you're just, smoking weed and playing Xbox and kind of like stuck in this like cycle, I think you have to like first, you want to break your patterns. You want to change your environment, get out of whatever rut you're in. So either like move to another town, change your friend group, change your habits, right? Go cold turkey on all the things that are pulling you down. But then in terms of the value that you bring, so as a young person that's seeking mentorship, I think the value you bring is like your enthusiasm, your energy. And one of the most gratifying things for mentors, because I've mentored veterans who were transitioning out of the army to get into entrepreneurship. That was I volunteered for a couple of years with the program, and the one thing I found was it was always disappointing to mentor someone and then never hear back from them, and they don't actually implement anything that you do. But there were a handful of veteran entrepreneurs that I mentored, and I still remember them to this day. Where they, I would say something, hey, like, yeah, one guy I remember he was having trouble pricing his products. He had like these natural tea products, and I told him about the Van Westendorp methodology for pricing. We do a pricing survey, and it basically says like, what's the highest price you'd pay for this? What's the lowest where you'd be suspicious? And it's like a 4-question survey. I told him to run this with his existing customer base of thousands of emails that he had from people who bought from him over the last couple of
I'm
years.
not familiar with that survey, but I'll write it down.
Oh, it's fascinating. Yeah, it's like I think the upper bound is at what price would this not be worth it? or what's the absolute most you would pay for this? What's the lowest? At what point would this price be so low that you would question the quality? And then the other one is, at what price would this feel like great value? That's like the second lower bound, and the upper bound, I can't remember. It's something like, would you be still willing to pay, but be a little stressed about it financially? And then that
Hmm.
gives you like kind of four data points of where you can play with your pricing. If you want to go luxury, if you want to go premium, if you want to go value or discount, right? Then you can take different price positioning there. Um, but anyway, so I told him about this. We walked through it. Like I had a guide open on how to do it, and I told him exactly what to do. He came back, I think it was like a month or two later, and said, "Hey, I did the pricing survey, updated all our prices. We're doing 30% more revenue now, thanks to the advice that you gave and the survey and all that." And that was super gratifying. So I think as a young person, when you're looking for mentors, it's thinking big. So mentors love big, bold ideas where they think they can help, right? Showing a mentor that they can help you and why them uniquely, right? You don't want to just like blast out a bunch of cold emails and cold DMs to people and say you're looking for a mentor. You want to be like, hey, I picked you because I read your report, I saw your interview, and these two or three points really stuck out to me. And we're working on something that I think you only, or you are like one of 10 experts in the world that I think could really add value here. And then you have an intro call. They'll give you some advice, right? If they're even like a little bit angled towards mentorship, then what you have to do is you have to go execute that advice quickly and then give them feedback within 2 to 4 weeks. You do that, you've shown them that you're ambitious, you think big, you put yourself out there and you execute and you're communicative and you give them feedback. Those are all like the traits that you look for as a mentor and a mentee.
Such sound advice. Such sound advice. The point that stood out most to me is the point about executing. So going back within 2 to 4 weeks saying, hey, I've done ABC, I think that tells whoever the mentor is, not only have I listened to what you've said, but I've actually actioned it. And even if it doesn't work, and I believe that most results in business life are lag effects. You don't go to the gym within 2 to 4 weeks, start seeing the same results. It takes some time. And I think I think a really good thing that younger generations are doing really well today is documentation,
Yeah.
documenting these processes, documenting saying, hey, I did all of these things in the last 2 to 4 weeks. Thank you so much. That is so imperative. I've got an example of two people that I've mentored. One girl who was after university, post grad, I was mentoring her. And I remember we would check in once every month, but she was so good at taking actions. And then she messaged me very randomly after we finished up, probably about a year or so afterwards, just said, hey, thank you so much. I've landed this job. I think it was at HSBC. It was a very steamed bank. All of your guidance was amazing. That was terrific. And then in the opposite, I had a guy who literally, as we spoke about there, I think we were talking for about 3 or 4 weeks, and then he just dropped off out of nowhere, and he just said, "I don't have the time to do this work." And it wasn't the case; he didn't have the time. Obviously, it was just
Yeah.
he didn't want to put the work in. And I think there's a lot of people who say, "I'm going to do the work. I'm going to take your advice seriously. I'm going to listen to what you say," but then seldom do they ever go through and run with it. And I think the ceiling or the level of competition right now is so low that if you just do the bare basics, and I would say if anyone who's clever and is 20 years old wants to follow what you've said, they could just take a step by step guide of what you said, print it out, and say, I'm going to follow this process. So I think that's invaluable what you've shared there.
Thank you. Yeah, that's exactly what I would do today, starting over from scratch. If I was, had no skills or like no real background, is get mentors and just do things, and you'll find you'll find your way.
I wanted to ask as well, you spoke about the three investors it was that who backed you at the start. How old were you when they backed you?
I was 25, and I had like a year of cold calling experience and then 4 years of military experience, but with no transferable skills. Like I was an infantry guy, so I had no transferable business skills from it, except for like the soft skills, right? Like, but nothing directly transferable. So they took a big bet on me.
What do you think they saw in you?
Probably ambition, and also the grit. I think that was a big thing because I was working a lot, I was putting in big hours, and I think they saw that. They saw some early success of the brand too. So it was like, we're getting some online sales. Like there was it wasn't like a completely just trust me, bro kind of situation. It was, we're making some progress, but we can accelerate. We can launch new products. We can expand markets. Like opportunities here. And I think I painted a compelling vision of, like it's small today, but here's how we're going to make it big, right? And here's the strategy. And so I think they like that. But ultimately, I mean, they told me afterwards the reason they invested was me, right? So which was very, very, very flattering and very, very inspiring, but also terrifying because you're like, okay, they're betting on me as a person, so I have to make this work.
Yeah, I I thought you would say that it's about you, and I think a lot of when you're unproven, sales comes down to your conviction, your energy, how proactive you are. How when someone says, "Hey, can you get an email over to me?" Do you get that email over to them in? And I think it's really the small details of, do you literally finish that call, write an email in the next 15 minutes, get that sent over, make sure there's no spelling mistakes, include the presentation, include a video walkover to say, "Hey, thank you so much. Here's what we went over," and then look at your next steps. And I think there's so much to be said about just taking initiative. There's probably been dozens of times where you've jumped on calls with people who are pitching you something, and they start with, "Hey, how you doing? Good." And that's it. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, I thought you were going to lead this conversation here, but it's just trying to take initiative and leading with intention. People don't, especially people who are high net worth and time poor, they don't like wasting their time.
Yeah, I think the bar is so low too that even if you just do a few minutes of research on someone before a call, and I mean today with AI it's even easier. You can just open up Grok or ChatGPT and say, "Tell me about this person," and write a short bio or something, and then you can actually understand a little bit about their background and make a comment about it to show that you actually cared enough to do some research. And if it's a sales prospect or an investor or something, even just preparing some materials before that are just for them. Like my when I was starting my consulting business, my main approach was doing Loom videos for people. So I would look at their website and I'd build this giant Google Doc that was like competitive research, messaging analysis, go to market channel recommendations, estimated cost of acquisition of customers or customer acquisition cost. And I would like make this 20-minute video and send it over. And a lot of people didn't watch the full thing, but those who did, they would jump on the call and it was just like, this is great. When can we start? It was kind of already sold.
Yeah, I posted a YouTube video probably at the start of the year actually, where it was talking about just uh, I think it was essentially making enough money to cover your corporate job. If we took an average job, I think it was $4,000 a month. I put it as, and I said in there that you should focus on doing the unscalable in a world where everyone is focused on, we need to do the scalable, we need to use all of these tools and systems, and we need to be contacting 100 people per day. But if you really pinned back and you said, I'm going to be really targeted and I'm going to contact 5 people per day, you'd probably see better results from being really hyper targeted, knowing that person inside out. If people knew how hot you like your shower, how strong you like your coffee, how you like your bacon cooked in the morning, you're going to be thinking, wow, this guy is, or girl is crazy. They've done so much research. It would be unreasonable of me to invite them into a meeting or to give them 15 to 20 minutes of their time. Just moving the conversation over just a little bit, talking about AI, and I know you consult and you work with some amazing companies. How have you used AI over the last, say, 12 months or so with them and yourself?
Yeah, so I started using ChatGPT right when it came out. I was aware a little bit about AI and machine learning, right? Having worked in tech sales and marketing for a bit, but I started using it initially just for basic stuff, like a little bit of research and writing posts and writing articles and stuff.
So, John, just transitioning over slightly, I'm curious, how does your current AI stack look? I know that you're working with several high growth businesses and that there's a lot of moving parts, but I'm curious to see how you're seeing AI shift your lens and what you've done over the last, say, 12 months or so. I know ChatGPT, but equally how you're seeing the market move.
Yeah, so I'm using AI in a lot of different ways. Everything from like deep research. I was a big user of that when it was first released with ChatGPT. I thought it was awesome to just to do like market research, messaging analysis, right? So getting like voice of the customer data. So getting it to like go look at Reddit, go look on social media, make me examples of what customers are using. To like refine the marketing and the landing page copy and content. Also, like doing analysis of sales calls. So, with a client I'm coaching right now, we'll take a transcript and then we can feed it into AI and say, okay, we're looking for these things. Were these questions asked, right? give some feedback on this approach. Also using it for content generation. So, and going beyond like just the basic, like write me a LinkedIn post about this, but you have to do like fact checking and hallucination checks and all that, because oftentimes AI will just slip in little details and stories that didn't exist. But overall, we're also using it for outreach. So it's kind of touching like every single bit of the business, everything from like personalizing messages for outbound on LinkedIn, um, creative for paid ads campaigns, like running meta ads right now for one client. And we're using AI to make the creatives. We made an AI video that we actually split tested. Everyone on the team thought that the AI video would underperform, but it's actually beating the initial carousel that was the winner. So the variant AI video is actually outperforming, which is funny because as marketers, you can recognize AI videos, but I think the segment that we were marketing to, they don't recognize that it's AI, so it still works really well. But yes, it's touching literally every part of the business, from like data analysis, like looking at the results from paid ads campaigns, creating content, personalizing outreach, strategizing, right? Looking at new markets that we can expand to. The big thing too is like collecting all the transcripts from calls. I think is super helpful, like using Fathom or Fireflies or
Hmm.
Otter, and using all that information too to kind of refine your strategy as you're going along. And I use it to write proposals. I use it to obviously I don't like just copy and paste the thing. I have to go through and like make sure it's good, but it gets me like an 80%
Absolutely.
draft right off the bat. Um, yeah, so that's basically how I'm using it. A bunch of different use cases right now. I think you just have to think of whatever you're spending time on manually. That includes like data analysis and writing. Find a way that you can use AI to streamline that. And if you can't, it's probably a prompt question.
If you could pick a hand of five tools you could only use that are AI based, what would they be?
Chat GPT just for like general purpose stuff. Claude for copywriting. I love using Claude. It just tends to produce better copy on the first
Mhm.
shot. Um, I used to use Perplexity, but less these days. I like Opus for clipping videos. Opus Pro, I think
Have
it's
you
really good.
tried Captions.ai?
I have not.
That is my recommendation over Opus. So we started using Captions about a month ago, and they'll be there for these clips for us way better than Opus.
Really? Okay, thank you. I'll
And
give
I
it a
think
shot.
they're roughly the same price, give or take.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, I'll give that a shot. Thank you. Um, what else? Clay. Clay is a huge part of my stack. I mean, I consider it's kind of an AI tool, but it's more like a general purpose
Hmm.
outreach and like list building tool, but I use a lot of AI in there. And that's pretty much it. I don't even have a fifth. Those are like my four main AI tools. Oh, sorry, Whisperflow. I guess technically counts as AI because I think they use AI to interpret your transcript and to give a higher resolution, higher quality. So I use Whisperflow like with the hotkey in my chat just to go faster. And I just brain dump when I have a situation or a question, and then I say, "Okay, organize my thinking here," and blah blah. Does a
I
really good
think,
job.
interestingly, Eric introduced me to Whisperflow. So just that FN, and you can just press the space bar, but you'll be there, you'll be in the middle of a Slack message, and normally you're just typing that out, but you just press that, you can walk up and down, think a little bit better. It's way quicker. There are some spell checks, but I imagine in 6 months' time it's going to be razor sharp. Or, for instance, if you say "good afternoon," it will put the comma there, then John, instead of "good afternoon, John," comma. Small details, but there's so many time saves out there.
Yeah, well, it does a really good job. My recommendation for using it is I don't actually use it for writing messages usually, like unless it's like an informal kind of text or Slack situation. But I use it in like within ChatGPT or Claude. And so if I'm working on a project, I'll have like a JSON context file that I'll paste into, about all the different details about a company with its products and services and value propositions and all that. And I'll say, and then I'll start Whisperflow and I'll just start rambling about the landing page and the key things we want to highlight, what's the user journey that we're trying to make. And I just give it a ton of context. And I say, okay, now turn this into a proper landing page brief. So I use it for like prompt refinement.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest advantages of AI is that if we look at decision fatigue, previously 2 3 years ago, we would be consumed by 1,000 decisions a day with regards to work. Whereas now, just with having that silo tool on the side, whether it's Claude, ChatGPT, whatever you're using, and you can synergize it with your stack together there, you're able to then reduce the amount of decisions you need to make in a day. Therefore, when you do tackle a task, you're more attentive, you're more focused, and you actually bring better quality to it. That's what I think the big benefit of AI brings to humans. Obviously, there's efficiency and speed, but looking at it from a day-to-day task. And I'd like to see the research in 5 or so years time, but I'm going to hazard a guess that it's going to reduce burnout.
I think it could. Yeah, I think you get higher quality outputs and you get a higher volume of outputs for the most part if you know how to use it right and you actually know how to do your job, like all that being prerequisite, like you actually understand what you're doing and the purpose and all that. I think it helps you go faster. It's like I was speaking to some senior devs who told me that they used to need 5 junior devs under them to be able to build an app, but today, like, why just orchestrate 5 AI agents instead? And that replaces the work of. So it's like if you have the expertise or the domain knowledge and you know how to use AI, you combine the two, that's where I think the real value is created.
Absolutely. John, it's been a pleasure. Where can people find you and what's next for you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. So just connect with me on there, Jon Caldwell, or just go to 3victor.io. That redirects to my LinkedIn.
Cool. And what's next for you?
What's next for me? Just working on some great client projects right now. Taking on more consulting projects. We're still traveling right now, so my family's been traveling the world for the last couple of years, but we're probably going to be starting to think about settling down in the next like 6 months or so.
And ideally, if you could pick one place right now to settle down in, where would it be?
Oh, geez. I can't pick one spot because I think we'll still end up traveling during the year.
Go on, pick
Um,
three then. What are the contenders to finish on?
I would like to split my time ultimately between, so we just spent 6 months in the Dominican Republic. So I loved
Amazing.
it there. Great, beautiful people, great
I'm
food. Like
looking,
it
I'm
was just
going
so
there at the
amazing.
end of the year, so I need some recommendations.
Absolutely. Yeah, we could take that offline. I got some great recommendations for you. I think you'd love them. So yeah, I'd probably spend like a few months there. And then we love Spain and Portugal. So probably spend a few months there too. And then visiting family in Canada the rest of the year, probably.
Sounds perfect. John, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.